Alrighty, let's start today off with GBP USD. Now, mind you, today is the start of the week. It's a Monday, and Mondays are usually slow and the volume can be wonky, okay? And we also have a high impact news on USD pairs later in the US session. So with that being said, sometimes you might not see much movement from USD crossed pairs due to the fact that it might be waiting for that particular news to push it in the direction and set it for the entire week, right? Sometimes. But sometimes also you might see if, let's say you might see the price going in one direction until the news comes for a reverse. That can also happen. I think my pen just died, but that's okay. Let me just charge it real quick in case I needed to map anything out for you. Alright, so with that being said, we have the sell zone up here for a GU pair, this GU pair, and our buy zone down here. Okay, zone to zone, even from key, I'm going to take it from key level to key level, is 170 pips far from each other, right? And we have this over here, which you can see there is no direct or no clear setups that are forming because it's just zigzag. Hence, it becomes a black zone. But if you are a scalper and you want to scalp, my suggestion would be wait for this H4 to close first, below this wick, to kill the buyers in this candle. Once it does that, and you can try to find a retracement into this engulfing failed, to find any sells if you want to scalp, okay? But if you are conservative and you do not want to lose unnecessary money in case it goes the wrong direction, I suggest you wait for a potential sell over here and a potential buy over here. And why a sell? Engulfing sell meets engulfing sell meets engulfing sell. Then for my buy, a sell that failed over here. In the process of failing, created an engulfing buy. And we have the second engulfing buy. So we have a complete ABC setup. And what's perfect about it is that it created the first and second engulfing around or through the key level. Okay? So current price is so close, super close to the buy zone. With it being close to the buy zone, there is a likelier chance that it would test the buy zone than the sell zone. This is logic, right? So what can GU do? If GU decides to drop into our buy zone and respect it, means if it does not close below, then potentially we can try to find a buy back up. But if H4 decides to come in and close below the zone, then potentially it might want to test a lower area. But for it to do that, it needs to also break this engulfing buy. Okay? Because sometimes you might see it breaks the zone and it still goes, bounces up even farther. We still have this last line of defense, all right, that if you want to monitor, you can. But for me, if I take a trade over here and it hits SL, I will just leave it be. Okay? Now, vice versa. If GU decides to climb all the way up into our sell zone and respects it, then potentially we can try to find a sell down. But if it breaks above, then I might want to test a high area. Once a zone is broken, these two, if a buy breaks, you can wait for the price to retrace to look for a potential sell. If the sell breaks, then you can wait for the retracement to look for a potential buy. Okay? That's for GU. Once the price reaches the zone, if you have a higher risk appetite, then you can switch straight down to M15 or M5. But if you are a low risk trader, wait for H4 to close first before going down to the M5 and M15 to find your setups. Okay? Now, GA, our sell zone and our buy zone. My sell zone is a fresh engulfing fail. What do I mean by fresh? When I say fresh, the previous H4 just broke our engulfing buy zone. Right? It broke this engulfing buy. After breaking, price has yet to retrace back to use the key level for a sell. That's why it is fresh. Okay? Then we have our buy zone, which is the same thing. Engulfing sell that failed, and after failing, price has yet to test the zone. So we have both fresh engulfing fails for a sell and for a buy. Fresh zones can be quite strong, so sometimes you might see after it retracing back for a sell, let's say, this sell can break this buy. Or if you see it buy from here, the buy can be so strong that it breaks the sell. Okay? There are potentials, but sometimes because due to the strength that it has, it can bounce up and down, go in a sideways movement between the sell and the buy until one of the zones break. So meaning if H4 decides to come in, close within, then potentially we can find a buy. Vice versa, if it comes into our sell, retraces back into our sell, and respects it, then potentially we can look for a sell. Because if this H4 closes in the black zone, you will have an EF, EG sell. But for now, it's only an EF, a fresh EF, until the H4 closes. Okay? Now, if the price decides to close below our buy zone or above our sell zone, meaning it breaks both of our zones, then potentially can test a higher zone or a lower area. When you enter a trade, let's say you were able to find a setup being formed after H4 has reached our zones, and you have found a setup in M15 or M5. Once you have found the setup and you have entered, wait for the setup to complete itself first before entering. But after you have entered, make sure you count 40 pips. Usually, I set my SLs at 40 pips. It's not too tight, not too loose, especially for currency pair. Just to help manage your losses, okay? But if some of you do not like to use SLs, then make sure you manage your account and manage your entries very strictly, all right? That's for GA. Next, we go to EU, our last pair. Okay, EU, sell zone is an EF, EG sell. Our buy, same thing. Current price is very close to our buy. But you also have to see that on H4, EU is going on a very, very heavy downtrend over here. But this engulfing sell was able to break the high of this engulfing sell. So, either if the price respects this buy zone, it can buy back up, and if the buy is strong enough, it can break this sell zone, right? But if it buys from here and decides to respect from here, showing that the sellers are trying to keep the price below this zone over here, then potentially that could be the start of the break of the buy zone too. Either way, if it respects the buy and the sell zone, it can go in a sideways until one of the zones break. So what do? You wait for H4 to reach. Once again, I'm repeating this over and over until you understand and see it happen. So if it reaches our buy zone, closes in, then you can look for a buy. If it comes into our sell zone, closes within, then you can look for a sell. But if H4 breaks below or breaks above, our zones are already broken. So you can use the key level, wait for the retracement for the opposite direction instead. Okay, for the TPs, again, I usually set my TP1 at 20 pips as just a reminder for me to set break even for the rest of my trades. Okay? But TP is something you are comfortable with. If you want to hold for 100 pips but you find yourself being anxious, then the 100 pips is not for you, not yet. Okay? So break it down. If you find yourself cutting the trade at 15 pips, then that's your first TP. All right? That's it for the 3 pairs, and I shall get back to replying to your messages as soon as possible. All right?